Well, hello there, and good day. Thank you so much for joining me at Ariel's Writing Corner, the place where we talk about writing related stuff. So, I was getting my New Year's video together, which is going to come out later today, probably in like 2 hours. And a friend of mine, David from the Comic Chameleons writing group, asked in general, he asked the group, and I asked if I could make this video. How many red herrings is too many? And that was an interesting question because red herrings are a thing that I don't usually have too many of, but it's worth exploring for a minute because it's a fun thing. So let's talk about red herrings. First of all, what is a red herring? Well, according to Wikipedia, it is something that misleads or distracts from a relevant or important question. So in other words, it's basically it's we're talking about thing A, person B brings up red herring C, which has nothing really to do with thing A necessarily, maybe a little bit to do with it, but isn't thing A. And we look at red herring C instead of plot topic A. It's an extremely simplified version of it. It's probably leaving a lot out. But the question wasn't what was a red herring, it's how many red herrings is too many. So, for example, a red herring might be that like you drop a clue in a mystery murder that implicates one person, but really it's not that person. But the reader reads the red herring and thinks it might be that person. Okay? Cool. Here are some questions I have for you when you're thinking about how many red herrings is too many. Because it's not really like there's no straight answer to this. So how many red herrings is too many? Well, how many herrings have truth? In other words, what is a completely out there thing like I'm at a murder mystery scene and I find a knife and I think maybe this is the thing, but there's no blood on it when it gets back to the lab and it gets tested. And there's no blood on it, but that knife's still there, so maybe they cleaned the blood off successfully. Maybe it's just a completely unnecessary knife that we just happened to find at the scene of the murder and we think it might be related, but it might not. Cool. How misled is too misled? If you remember that red herrings are designed to mislead your reader, which is a fine thing to do in a murder mystery, how misled do you want your readers? Part of the satisfaction of a murder mystery is that some percentage of people are gonna probably figure out who the killer is, and some percentage of people are gonna have a pretty good idea who the killer is, even if they don't know. A popular one in my realm of fiction right now is in Hunter x Hunter. It's the user of silent majority and who that person or persons might be, because you have a murder that takes place in a room and there's a whole list of people in the room and there's a couple of these murders, everyone's in the room, and we're trying to figure out who might have done it. Now, this involves supernatural powers, and there are certain plot elements that are shown to the reader that might rule candidates for the killer out, but also when they're basically truth serumed, they give an answer that's not an inaccurate answer, but not an inaccurate thing. For example, like, can you use magic? The word is nen, but I'm using magic, so we all understand it's magic. Can you use magic? And the person goes, well, I've never heard of magic until today. Doesn't mean you can't use it, because people can use it without knowing what it is. Just a thing. So, how misled do you want your readers to be? Because if you give them 5 red herrings, they're not going to be able to figure out which ones might be real, which ones might not be. So you don't want them to be too misled, but you do want them to be misled enough that they have doubts about what's going on, at least in the early to middle part of the book. Speaking of complexity, how complex is your plot? So I mentioned Hunter x Hunter. The silent majority killer is one small part of a much larger plot. So that's one way to do it. But if the whole mystery is one mystery with like 10 candidates instead of like realistically like 50 candidates, you know, if you count people that aren't in the room, we're just counting people in the room. How complex is your plot? How much do you want to be going on with your plot before you get too convoluted? You know, is this a murder mystery that takes place over the course of one book and is the central focus of the book, like a traditional murder mystery book might be? Is this a murder mystery that's going to be a side plot over the course of a 3-book trilogy or something like that? Is this a whole series of books where there's one murder mystery that transcends them all, and then there's little mysteries strangled within, and you can put a red herring to main plot versus book plot versus side plot? How complex is your plot? Because depending on the complexity, you have more room for more red herrings, but also those red herrings do stack up and each one takes away from the others. And finally, what's the real payoff? Again, a lot of murder mysteries, there's some percentage of readers who are going to figure it out. It shouldn't be so easy that everyone figures it out. And I'm not saying like there's good murder mystery readers and bad murder mystery readers. Everyone takes their own evidence and processes it differently, comes to a different conclusion. I'm not great with murder mysteries, to be honest. I'm the kind of person that would get got. But what's the payoff? Well, the payoff is in when the murderer is revealed, how many people are like, oh, that makes sense? How many people are like, oh, I knew it? How many people are like, oh, I had no idea? And how many people are like, oh, that's a bad answer. That makes no sense. And part of that is in how you end the story, how you wrap it all together. Red herrings or not. Because a red herring can have nothing to do with it. That knife we found in the murder scene had nothing to do with the actual murder. And maybe the murder weapon wasn't a knife. Maybe the knife was used in self-defense but never got successfully used. Whatever. Maybe the knife just happened to be on the kitchen shelf. And that red herring can be a distraction from the payoff or it can add to the payoff. So you have to kind of go through and you have to see what distracts, what adds. If I may, a lesson I learned from the book I'm revising and right now with my editor is don't spoil your editor on suspense moments. If you see this, you know who you are. And because it makes the suspense a little less suspensey. But anyway, yeah, that's about it. It's been a while since I made one of these videos, but if you have this is the wrong screen. Oh well. If you have a question you'd like answered, leave it in the comments below. I will try to get to it. This is a new year, so maybe I'll be making more of these. Maybe I won't get any questions for 6 months, and I'll just be like, oh, okay, I got nothing, because I can't come up with any on my own, because I'm not good at that. Or maybe I'll come up with some on my own, who knows. But anyway, like I said earlier at the start of this video, I'm going to have my year in review coming up next. I'm going to sit down and do that. This is just a warm-up for my voice. So I want to thank you all so much for joining me. I want to spend a moment to just think about Ariel the cat. You know, my poor office cat who passed earlier this year. We named this place after her. Thank you all so much for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode, there's 2 things you can do. I have the YouTube channel, Jesse Pohlman. You can subscribe to that. And I have the Blue Sky, which is at jpohlmanwriting.com. I also have my website where I post, like, some thoughts on various series. The latest article I wrote was about Code Geass, the R1 and R2 series. I could do Lelouch of the Resurrection. I could do Code Geass. I'm working on Code Geass, Rose of the Rebellion. It's alright. It's not bad. It's good. It's different. It's what happens when you resurrect an anime series like 15 to 20 years later and start messing with the meta plot. But yeah, that's about it. Thank you all so much for joining me, and as always on this channel, pieces.